Welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting. And we will start with any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to any amendments to the agenda, David?
No amendments.
All right. And we will move on to agenda item 4, a resolution of necessity for capital construction project.
So I'm going to ask, again, I think most of you know Bob Fletcher. And as a result of the question that came up at the last board meeting related to these items, the request of the board was to obviously be able to include the total cost of the project, but also to be clear about that it excludes interest, right? And so that was a question we were unsure of at the time. We kind of warned, we took action, so either or could be there. And Bob has provided legal opinion, and what's before you tonight, which he can explain, does have those items included. The board will have to act on all of those again. But again, I think it's pretty straightforward, but I'm going to let him walk you through the documents at your place. You have the documents that are there, including the all paperclip together, including the warning. Welcome, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So following up on last week's vote, there was some concern that the either-or language would make it uncertain as to which form of the ballot question would be put to the voter. So it was my advice that the board take a few moments tonight and clarify and adopt a single form for the necessity resolution and the warning, which you will need anyway for your budget, to put your budget in an election of officers before the voters. What you have is a resolution of necessity that the form of which has been modified slightly to specify that it will supersede and essentially repeal the action taken last week, and this will be the be-all and end-all with respect to necessity. And it has attached to it a form of the warning for Article 2. It's marked as a sample, and a form of the ballot also for Article 2. And the language that you will see on the ballot and article will be reflected on your warning that is also in front of you. It's modified, as you can see, we've given you the red line so that you can see it's been modified to more clearly state, excuse me, that the bond amount is for capital construction costs, and that it is exclusive of interest, which I think was the item that you all were trying to accomplish last week. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think that the form of the resolution that you have in front of you with the attachments, and then the form of the warning that you'll think about or act on later should capture your intentions.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay. So, David, do you recommend we go through these individually as we did last week? And given that we read these thoroughly last week, maybe we read what the specific changes are in each of these items?
That would be my recommendation, just to do the red line version, and then just recap what changed. So again, it's pretty clear, pretty simple, because it's specific about interest. And I don't know, Bob, do you feel like we need to physically read every one of these? We did that last time. We read, actually, board members read through each one of these.
Into the record,
Yeah.
David?
Do you think that's needed, or can they simply act on it as provided?
Yeah, it's not, hasn't been my experience in the past that these are read verbatim into the record. If they're if they're acted upon, there's a motion made and seconded properly, and it's acted upon in its final form, I think that's sufficient.
Yep.
But obviously, if the board wishes to have them read into the record, we can do that too.
Okay. We did read these into the record verbatim last week, which took a group effort.
I imagine they did.
But for purposes of this meeting, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I ended up characterizing the resolution of necessity for capital construction project as really the equivalent of a certificate of need. That became the basis off of which the issuance of general obligation debt and the district meeting warning followed. Is that?
Yes, I mean, that's a good shorthand way to look at it, obviously, but the statute requires that before you put a vote, a bond vote to the voters, that you have to find necessity, that you have to find that the improvements that you wish to make are needed and important and consistent with your mission. And then you need to find as well that the amount of money for the capital project itself, for the construction project itself, is not something that you have laying around, that you actually need to bond for that expense.
Okay.
And that's the piece, that's the intro piece. And then, of course, in the course of the resolution, you adopt the form of the article, which you have as marked as a sample, and that you adopt the form of the ballot question that will be put to the voters. And those two, are in lockstep with one another. They read the same. So it is the package, if you will, the precursor that you need to adopt and agree to in order for the bond vote to be put on the warning, for the warning to be put before the voters and for the voters to act upon. So it's the genesis for all of that.
Then I really shorthanded it.
Well,
So why don't I'm going to just briefly read through what was redlined, and obviously the original documents were available from last week. But the specific comments in the resolution of necessity for capital construction project reference an estimated total capital, with capital being redlined, cost of $209,588,828. An addition is parens exclusive of interest. Further down on the page, there is a resolution that a proposal for the issuance of general obligation bonds of the district in principal amount versus aggregate amount, not to exceed the same amount, and again with the parens exclusive of interest. And then further down, a resolution that the necessity resolution warning and the form of the ballot adopted by this board at its meeting on January 15th, 2020, are hereby respectively rescinded, repealed, and superseded by this resolution and the attachments hereto. So those are the primary changes that were made in what was approved, along with the direction to see if there was some guidance that could include that. The changes that are included in red line version here. So do I have a motion to approve the resolution of necessity for capital construction project with the proposed red line changes?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Further discussion by the board? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Seems to satisfy
Right.
the changes that were requested last week.
So these are all in your packet, and these can be signed this evening.
So we'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the authorization for issuance of general obligation debt for school construction, which is also warned for action.
Can I just ask a question to make sure I understand what you've just said? So you're going to list the principal amount and in parentheses, in more than one section, say exclusive of interest. Is that the gist of what you just said?
In this specific action item, Jerry, this is the resolution of necessity for capital construction, so it does have exclusive of interest listed, and it references principal amount not to exceed the amount.
Okay.
And then it rescinds last week's action. So this is specific to authorization of, to issue general obligation debt for capital construction. Does this have an article associated with it?
It's the form of Article 2.
Okay.
And it is incorporated by reference in the resolution of necessity.
Got it.
But because there are changes to it, it probably would be wise to let the voters know what those changes are, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, and again, the changes on here, there was a change of general obligation debt for, it now reads capital construction versus school construction. It also references the properties at a total project cost. It now references capital construction cost. It includes the parens exclusive of interest after the capital construction costs that I've referenced in the previous document. And then it also indicates that the 0% of the project is eligible for state construction aid, and therefore 100% of capital construction versus project cost plus interest will be the responsibility of the South Burlington School District. And the specific warning language, which will again show up in Article 2, is shall the bonds of the South Burlington School District in a principal amount versus in an amount. So principal is specifically called out. Do I have a motion to accept the changes in language as read in the red line version?
So moved.
Second?
Any further discussion? And there's no need to indicate rescission of last week's action.
You've already done that.
In the total.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the motion passes. And we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is consider the annual school district meeting warning. And I'll just make sure that's the only change. We had already approved the general warning, Article 1, which is election of officers, Article 3, which is the budget. And we are talking specifically about Article 2. So again, a summary of the changes here would be general obligation debt for capital construction versus school. That this is referenced, the properties at a capital construction cost of versus total project cost of. The parens after the dollar amount is exclusive of interest. The same indication of unavailability of state construction aid, indicating that South Burlington District would be responsible for 100% of the capital construction versus total project cost, and plus interest is indicated following that. And I do not see a change on the language on the shall the bonds. It still lists in a principal amount versus, oh, I'm sorry, that is the change.
It is a change, it just didn't get highlighted,
Okay,
Madam Chair.
so it indicates that shall the bonds in a principal amount not exceed that amount. And what's previously indicated above it is exclusive of interest. So do I have a motion to approve the changes as redlined in Article 2?
So moved.
No second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we have those approved. Thank you, Bob, for the
You're welcome.
review of that. And do we have those for signature, David?
Yes, they're in the
Can
packet.
those hold to the end of the meeting, or?
I don't see why not, Bob. I mean, would you rather us sign them right now, or? No, it's fine. We,
Whatever's convenient for the board.
yeah, we'll sign them with the other stuff.
Signed before they get to the town, or to the
Yep,
city clerk.
no problem. So we'll put them they're within the packet for signature.
Great. All right, thank you. Delaney, I know we're missing Cole this evening. I think he fell victim to the influenza.
I know.
I don't know that specifically, but did get a note from him, he wouldn't make it. So I will ask for announcements from you and any
Yeah.
other comments.
So some past events that we've had is this past Friday, the Student Justice Union visited Orchard, Champlain, and Rick Marcotte to talk about race and injustice. And also this weekend, the SBHS speech team took second at the Essex competition. And tomorrow will be the 8th grade academic info night at the high school. And on Thursday, January 23rd, there will be a community dinner and equity dialogue at the middle school from 5:30 to 7. This includes a free dinner and discussion about equality. January 23rd, 24th, and 25th, Orchard School will be performing Peter Pan. Matinee is on the 23rd, 6 o'clock on the 24th, and 5:30 on the 25th. And on the 31st, there will be the District Chorus Festival for middle school. And on February 3rd, South Burlington High School will have a Black History Month assembly at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Delaney.
Great. Any other announcements? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 8, city-school collaboration.
So we have our upcoming Friday meeting. It's been changed from 10:30 to 11. Elizabeth, myself, Kevin Dorn, and Helen Reilly. And so that is on for Friday. We'll be talking about some of the items, one of which will be a little more clarity around where we are with the noise mitigation programming. We had a pretty robust agenda last time, and there'll be some follow-up to some of those items that we had. In addition to the noise grant, we also talked about master planning, some legislative items such as lead testing and school construction, where we are with budgets, city reappraisal, and bringing back impact fees. So we'll probably revisit some of those again. That's all I have.
All right, any suggestions for other topics for the leadership meeting Friday? All right. On to the superintendent's report.
So I have 4 items here. I'll be quick and let Gary do a couple of these. First one, Rick Marcotte. Again, you heard a little bit of that, but Rick Marcotte.
Real quick, the foundation is it.
Good.
So,
Sounds repetitive.
nothing really significant to report. The project's on schedule. They've had pretty good luck with frozen ground due to the recent weather. I did want to report back on the question that all the lighting is operational, including the 2 lights that had the issue that are attached to the building. They are all back and operational now. And that's really all I have right now for Rick Marcotte.
Thank you, Gary. Enrollment and staffing update. Again, I just, by your place, I put another, just again, kind of an update, and the first page is small, but sorry about that. It does show on the top, it's the current enrollment as of 1/22, so we just pulled that today. And then it does still have our anticipated. To the far right, or to the middle portion, you can see if there's a -1 or a +1, you see some of those. And that's the change since the last report that we did back on January 7th. Basically, we're holding pretty consistently where we are with enrollment. I do want to note that we've added some immediate support to Rick Marcotte. We're in the process. We've posted an anticipated for a teacher and a para to help with that enrollment, of which you'll see come back to you. I'm hoping perhaps in February you'll see that addition. But right now we're using some additional resources just to help support Rick Marcotte. So again, giving you a little bit of an update on where we are with enrollment, kind of the ebb and flow that happens. Again, a lot of the data that you've had relative to budget and those numbers, obviously, you're going to see some fluctuations here based on the current as we continue through the school year. So that's update on enrollment. I don't know if folks have any specific question for me. Hearing none, we'll move on to Chamberlain noise mitigation. There's a couple things in play. As you know, we did some sound testing ourselves. Exactly, I'm not sure, it was in the spring of couple years ago, actually, I believe, where we had ATC. They're a firm that came and did some testing based on very prescribed times when the F-16s were flying, inside noise when they're flying, and then inside noise when the windows are open. And so Gary has, based on my request, has gone back out to ATC and has acquired a bid from them, or a quote from them. Will be unbudgeted. It's about $4,500. And so we're putting that into motion. We think that will be important information to get kind of our continued baseline, kind of where are we. In addition, working with the airport and the FAA and Jones Payne's group, part of the grant process was to get a quote on a variety of HVAC, air conditioning, air treatment system for that school. We have received the report from L&N Construction. We didn't orchestrate that. That was, again, done through Burlington, FAA, and Jones Payne. We did get that report back. However, there's no cost associated with it. So for us, I have asked for a meeting, for Gary and I to have a meeting with airport officials to say, we did get the report. There still is the 10% issue out there around local match, of which they really are asking us to pick one of those options. The construction firm has picked their recommended option, but there's no cost there. So again, our point will be that we kind of need to know the cost, although I don't know why we would go against any recommendation that they're doing to satisfy the FAA requirement for noise mitigation. So we're moving through that. In addition, you heard.
A quick question on that. Was cost included in the report and just
No.
not provided?
Was not provided to us. I don't know if it was provided to the airport, but there's nothing in the report that has any cost, although it does make reference to a general number, I think, of $3.5 million or something.
That came from Nick Longo. The general number his estimate was around $3 million.
So I don't know what option that pertains to. So again, we have some questions of clarity. In addition, Kevin Dorn, through Vermont Gas, is looking at whether or not the 10% match can be picked up through whatever that's an energy, again, I shared this with you last time, an energy amount that's collected. And right now, he is asking the airport officials whether or not that money can satisfy the FAA grant 10%. If the answer is yes, then that's helpful. If the FAA says no, it can't be, then obviously we're back at some needed next steps. So again, a lot of information in a short period of time. I don't know if you have any specific questions on that, but that's where we are.
In terms of student impact, you haven't heard anything new from Holly? Because you said you had regular check-ins with her, right?
Yeah, so Holly, well, I'm going to get in trouble if I say regular, because I haven't regularly, like within the last couple of weeks, I just said hi to her this afternoon. I'm like, I haven't seen you for a while. That's my guilt. But Holly's here, and again, last time reported, there wasn't any specific, but Holly, I'll let you be the responder to that. Any current complaints or concerns?
Nothing current that's come up that you don't know about.
Right. We had one early, way back, but that was really it. Again, I want to be careful here that we haven't gotten complaints, but we're also, when the jets do fly, a lot of the staff, like in the past, have become, very accustomed to the noise over the years, but we've had no complaints.
Yeah, not to suggest no impact, just right, yeah, sure.
It's also wintertime and the windows are
Yeah.
closed, so it may look different in the spring.
Yeah.
Is there a end date beyond which we have a different plan in place from either a mitigation standpoint, or, because it does seem like this has dragged on a
Yeah.
long time?
So again, in our obligation, obviously Gary, with me, is to make sure that the environment there is appropriate for learning. So if we get to springtime, there may be some decisions that we need to make. Again, we're hoping that, the information that we're currently going to gather on noise, along with hopeful progress, will be appropriate. If not, then we'll have to, go a different version. And again, I think at previous board meetings, Gary's provided some update to the board around, units that could provide conditioned air or air conditioning, and some of those were very expensive. So again, we're still in the mix of looking at what other options could be, up to including being able to keep some windows closed that are in the most affected area and some open in other affected areas. Affected areas. So, anyway, that's kind of what's in front of us. So we have a multitude of options there that we're trying to have available. Okay?
Okay.
So next, I'm going to ask Mike Martin, again, our Director of Learning, and he's brought some folks too. He's got a presentation tonight, about 15 minutes, 15 minutes. Again, an important topic. Professional development days. And again, we've been very fortunate, and thank you to the board. They'll go into more detail. For over 3 years, we've had the opportunity really to have some benefits for having what we call late starts or early dismissals. That really has been able to significantly benefit our professional development work with our staff. It has been important to be able to spread it throughout the school year. In the past, we were in a situation where we would add those either at the beginning or the end, and it's hard for then those practices to take effect within a school year. Again, I think there's all kinds of challenges still when you have to transition from professional development either in the morning or ending it with all of the things that we want teachers to be able to do and be ready for the next day or the immediate time ahead. But again, it has been important for us, particularly in the area of many of the requirements that have been coming our way. And again, albeit many of them are good, but there's been a magnitude, and I think you'll get a flavor of some of those from Mike and the principal. So again, joining Mike is Holly, Lissa, and Carson. I think the board is all very aware of them. So again, thank them for being here, and let's kick it off. Thank you, Mike.
I just want to thank the board for having us tonight. We're glad to be here to discuss with you and to share some more information around the impact of the teacher learning communities that have been taking place, this work that's taking place during our late starts and early dismissals. And so I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Carson Schlenter from the middle school, and my colleague Lissa McDonald from the high school, and my colleague Holly Rao from Chamberlain School. We're just going to talk about the fact that this is a research-based approach. We're going to make a connection to research. We're going to show the impact on teacher learning as well as the impact on student learning. And then we're going to talk about the ongoing need for teacher learning communities. So first, a research-based approach. John Hattie is a researcher who's sort of like the Beatles to educators. And it's because he does these huge, there's a background noise? Oh. He does these huge meta-analyses based on thousands, actually over 150,000 studies with huge N sizes, drawing on studies that have taken place all across the world. So in the past 25 years, this body of research now is over 140,000 meta studies, so that they draw on other studies. And the number one thing on this huge sort of vacuuming up of research is collective teacher efficacy. This is the single biggest effect size when we look at what makes a difference for students' learning. So what's collective teacher efficacy? It's the shared belief of a school staff and their ability to positively affect students. So not one teacher's belief that they can make a difference in their classroom, but the idea that as a school community, together we can make a difference for students. So this is a quote again from that research. And the idea here is that too often, traditionally, teachers have operated as freelancers who work in the same building. And teacher learning communities bring teachers together to learn from each other, to share what's working, and so that we can have a continuous improvement approach.
And so we depend on, as principals, we depend on our educational journals to help guide us in making really good decisions about how to help us grow. And so we looked to Education Week, and we found an article about a highly ranked school in California that embedded regular professional development time into their teacher learning professional development series. This school had 105 minutes of time embedded into the schedule per week for teachers to learn together, to model lessons for each other, to have peer-to-peer learning so that they could have an impact across the school for all students. And these teachers were able to incorporate their strategies more immediately as opposed to the sit and receive approach that I know I had early in my career as a teacher. We used to schedule professional learning so that there were a few at the beginning of the year, a few more at the end of the year, and maybe 2 or 3 intermittently scheduled throughout the remainder of the year. And this just leads to this sit and deliver information approach, and then teachers go back to teaching and they don't have time to practice with each other and to try out the strategies that they're learning about. And that's why we wanted 3-4 years ago, we asked for a different kind of professional learning calendar. Again, from Education Week, I really like this quote that more than any other investment in education, talented teachers matter most for student success. And what we want to see is teachers, again, learning together, collaborating, trying out some things together so that we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum for all students. We have to guide and push all of our students. We also have to individualize education for students and personalize education. And we can't do that alone as individual contractors in our classrooms. We have to work together to do this.
More research coming back to Vermont. So there is now a new Vermont multi-tiered system of support field guide that just came out in November. One of the pieces are these 5 components that have been happening in the old MTSS field guide that are also in the current new improved MTSS field guide. And one of the components is effective collaboration. Which is what we're doing in our TLCs. And if you ask any educator here in South Burlington, they will definitely tell you that the most commonly reported barrier to professional learning is the lack of time to collaborate. We also know that the field guide includes some of the national research here, which says that schools that have effective collaborative cultures produce students with higher achievement and better levels of skills and understanding. So this is the field guide that we are accountable to right here in Vermont. They're also pointing out, and this research actually comes from Vermont educators, who many of us know in the education world. These are kind of the gurus here in Vermont: Marge Lipson, Jane Meckelson, and they're talking about, they've actually studied successful Vermont schools and are pointing out that improved student achievement is directly linked to having time for purposeful collaboration.
Thank you, Holly. 3 years ago, we came to you and asked for additional professional development time, and a lot has happened in the meantime. So the 3 following slides basically show detailed accomplishments over all of these 3 years at all 3 levels, pre-K through 12. Obviously, there's a lot to read. This is first year, 2017, 2018. One of the things that you see there is many commonalities. You see a natural progression, certainly over the years, but also across the grade levels. And, the other piece is student-centered learning. And, as Holly said and Lissa said, a lot of it based on teacher collaboration, I have to say I'm very proud of my staff, and I know everybody feels that way, the accomplishments that they have done, they have made over the years. As being a middle school educator, I also have to mention that we've been fortunate enough to have the Tarrant Partnership that's basically at no cost over the past 3 years that has really been able to, they've helped us a lot in our professional learning, but they also gave us the ability to make this sustainable, to continue in the future, and make this relevant to learning, to student learning. Oh, one more. There we go. Yeah, so this is a reflection of what we've done this year, actually, and we're still continuing to work on that. There's a lot to read. I'd be glad to answer any questions, but a lot of good work.
So we're going on to the next section of our presentation, and we're going to show you some photos of our teachers learning together. And this slide is from the staff at Champlain School, and they were working on establishing their core beliefs, working together to identify them. Correct, Holly? And empathy is one of them. Elementary school teachers are working on the C3, the social studies standards, and also working on resiliency. Here, one of my high school teachers, Emily Gilmore, went to the elementary level to help teachers learn about the C3 standards. So again, we can send teachers from different buildings who have become experts to help other teachers learn what they've already been focusing on. So this is, again, the elementary schools, led by my high school teacher. And Life is from the Tarrant.
Yeah, this was actually Sam
Yeah.
Nelson,
Oh, this is Sam?
teacher from, Shelburne Community Schools.
Okay, but Life is the person tweeting out about this great PD, a teacher from another district sharing expertise with our middle school teachers. These are some high school teachers from last Friday. This is the English department, and they're writing consistent learning targets, and then they're going to develop consistent learning scales to measure those targets, again, for a guaranteed and viable curriculum. Our science department, I've got 2 life science teachers and their department head, and they're trying to figure out a way to incorporate some good learning targets. These are the pre-K through 2 teachers modeling a lesson on phonics for their colleagues. Back to the high school, we have an outside facilitator, Andrew Jones, coming in to help us lead some of our proficiency-based learning. This was last year at our Universal Design for Learning TLC series. We mixed it up. We went to the library on this day. And this is a little bit of sit and deliver, but that doesn't last for very long because then we break out into groups and figure out how we're going to make this learning impact our students directly. Elementary schools working on restorative practices. And back to some working on phonics at the pre-K through 2 level.
But the most exciting part is how does this trickle down to our students? So what is the impact on student learning based on these TLCs? And again, this is just a little snippet of what happens every day in our classrooms, thinking about pre-K up through grade 12. We know that the skills and knowledge, this is showing a restorative circle that happened. And those are happening, at Chamberlain, I know that last week, was it just last month, I presented on our Wolfpack time. So thinking about how is it that we're using those restorative practices to improve school culture. This is the Wolfpack time, which is a developmentally appropriate multi-age group where students are learning to have equal voice. And then how does that phonics instruction look in the classroom? This is a kindergarten classroom. You might have noticed the color-coded letters, the vowels are red, consonants are blue that the teachers were holding up before. So here's kindergartners who are actually looking for those vowels and consonants. And this was actually in the fall of kindergarten. This is at the middle school, a student-led conference where students are setting goals and talking about their personalized learning plans. They're coming up with strategies for having respectful discourse and dialogue, and these strategies can be applied to any content area. A C3 Global Studies unit resulted in elementary learning from the high school students. And we are seeing that growth mindset and perseverance have become the norm in our teaching kindergarten through 12th grade. Formative assessment has become targeted towards growth and mastery of our proficiency-based requirements. And our teachers are using universal design for learning strategies that include voice and choice.
Okay, it's me again. Yeah, I've got one, don't I? Okay, one of the things that obviously has been a concern is how this may or may not impact families, and how we can possibly mitigate that, the difficulty for some of the families, whether it's childcare, those kind of things. One of the ways we did that is by trying to consolidate the TLC days, making sure that they're on the same days, because again, parents obviously often have siblings in different schools. The other piece, we coordinate with the Schools Out program, also the local child care providers who we're working with in our pre-K program. The cafeteria here at the middle school is open. I can vouch for that. I'm usually here around 7 o'clock, and we actually have kids walk in on those late start days at 7:30. It is supervised. The kids can be there. They can read. They can do their homework. So the same thing is true at the high school, and I understand that the library is also available there.
Thanks. So we're coming to the end of our presentation here. And we just want to end by speaking to the ongoing need for TLCs, the idea that the work is not done and we need to continue to have embedded professional development, like Lissa was saying, that doesn't happen just a couple of times a year. Just a friendly reminder of the massive educational reforms that have been taking place in Vermont, and it's humbling to look at this list. And I think any educator that you could speak to would agree that this work isn't done. Some of it's very new, whether we're thinking about Act 1 or the Vermont MTSS field guide that just came out this past fall. But these are huge educational reforms that are still very much underway. This is just a snapshot of where some of the things that you heard my colleagues talking about, from the National Social Studies Standard, C3, with a focus on citizenship, the restorative practice work, resiliency work, universal design for learning. This is a Venn diagram that shows some of our major goals of our continuous improvement plans across the district. There's actually a fourth one, which is safe, healthy schools, which kind of runs throughout all of these. But just so that you know that this is really a critical lever to advance this work. I honestly don't know how we would be making progress towards these goals without this embedded professional learning. Also, it's important to note that this is become the norm, probably out of necessity. And so when we look at when we talk to our colleagues in neighboring districts and neighboring schools, this is really common practice now to have early release or late starts or both for professional learning, so that it can take place, again, not like 2 or 3 days during the year, but it can be embedded. Teachers can be learning from each other and actually trying things out. And like Holly said, what's exciting to us is not just to deliver professional development, but when we see teachers turning around and using it Monday morning in the classroom. That's where we feel like we're having an impact on student learning. So to close, and then we're available for your questions, The district request is just to continue at the current level to make sure that this continuous professional learning collaboration continues in order that we have a successful implementation of the huge educational reforms currently underway, including but not limited to proficiency-based learning, personalized learning like student-led conferences, Wolfpack time, advisory work, personalized learning plans, of course, flexible pathways, social-emotional learning when we're thinking about resiliency, restorative practice, UDL, and culturally responsive teaching. So we have a lot to work on and still a lot of work ahead. So thank you for listening, and we're available for any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Mike. Melissa, Holly, Karst?
I just had a question on it's mainly for the high school, but the learning practices, how are you trying to make sure that implicit biases are not part of the learning practices?
That's a good question, Delaney. We have spent 2 TLC sessions working as a staff, reading articles, learning about implicit bias, pointing out how they exist, not only in grading, but all across the school. There's still more learning for us, and I think that as once we had our 2 sessions and had a lot of conversation. We used protocol so everybody had a voice. We were able to make an adjustment to the learning practices. So implicit bias wasn't as, it wasn't impacting students as heavily as we learned that it had been.
Mm-hmm. What was the adjustment?
Can we talk? Can we talk about this at school?
Yeah,
this
sure,
part.
totally.
So yeah, we gave teachers a choice in how they were going to use the learning practice in their grades. How they were going to collect information to make a judgment about students' learning practices. So some of it was using student self-reflection instead of teachers assigning a point, the point system to the learning practices. But I think it would be easier for me to show you and explain
Sure,
that at school. Okay? Thanks.
What is feedback from teachers about how things are structured and how this is
Wanna do
different
that?
from what we were doing in the past?
Kick us forward a couple of slides. We actually had a couple of backup slides that we cut out in the interest of time. And so a couple of things. We have learning goals. Any session that we have at a TLC, they're the same. We're trying to model what we're hoping teachers will be doing. So there are stated learning intentions for each session, so that's clear what the purpose is. And then next slide, Carson, please.
Mhm.
Oh, I've got the clicker. Sorry.
Yeah, it's still working.
And then we also have exit cards at each session. And we actually review them, and we change the elementary TLC plan for the year based on teacher feedback. For example, elementary teachers reported last year that we had a carousel, like a rotation, where each school faculty would see, for example, restorative practice 3 times, but they'd go through a rotation with C3 and resiliency. And so teachers were saying, by the time we come back around to it, I forgot what we learned the first time. And so based on that feedback, we did a much deeper dive with just literacy and math. And so it's a narrowing, right? That's also an issue. But the feedback has been really positive from those sessions because teachers are able to connect with grade level colleagues from different buildings, and also to go deep into instructional practice. So they feel like this high degree of relevance there. But we look at the exit data, we follow it closely. And let me see. Oh, and also our facilitators bring that back to the group. So that's also a common practice for facilitators to say, okay, what went well last time? This is what teachers are saying. So we're collecting a lot of data, and actually not just collecting it, we're using it to try to always be making the sessions better.
Yeah, actually, I can add to that too. We have a professional learning committee here at the middle school. We generally meet once a week, and I would say we've been very responsive to teacher feedback also. We always collect it at every TLC session. We have exit cards, And so far, we've gotten very positive feedback, sometimes some suggestions, and we've been responsive to that. So that's an excellent question.
So what's David, we're going to articulate, what is are the number of days that are currently
Yeah, so we,
either early starts or late release?
so right, we have
No,
currently.
other way around.
I know what you're saying.
Early release, late start.
Yeah, so we have currently 9 elementary early dismissals, and we have 14 late starts currently. Each essentially is a 2-hour session, so at the elementary, obviously 18 and 28 hours at the high middle for the 14. So again, I'm just generalizing the two. Obviously, our academic calendar is based on 180 student days. And so, however, on average, we seem to be around 2 or 3 snow days or emergency closure days, knock on wood, hope we don't have any more. So, anyway. I mean, I think we're consciously aware of the instructional time. That said, there's flex scheduling that happens at the high school and the middle school. And on a normal regular day, Lisa can highlight this, that students come in, there's some period of time before they go right to a class. When they have a late start, they do that. I don't know how you would.
Yeah,
give
what
more
we do
detail
is
on
we, on a late start day, we don't have advisory and we don't have FaceTime, so that helps us keep time in the class period. And our classes are reduced by 5 minutes each. And we still need room for lunch. We can't shave off lunch, but we're still.
So that's a good example of, again, the day is shorter, but the academic one-on-one time on the core work is there. Again, we don't want to say that some of those, the advisory and the FaceTime aren't important either, but we're also, there's conscious effort on that. I think at the middle school, similarly.
Yeah, core classes are reduced by 5 minutes. We do not have I-time or the morning teacher advisory, for example. So it is reduced, the day is reduced that way. But generally, the instructional time is not greatly reduced.
Yeah. At the elementary, obviously, it's, with an early dismissal, it is. You know, there's nothing we can really do in the schedule. Holly, you run a same schedule on that particular day, other than it being an early dismissal. But if there's an art, music, or physical education, they keep that. Is that correct?
Yes, and if they have art, music, or physical education in the afternoon, they make it up at a different time during the week so that they're not missing their integrated arts time.
So there's some conscious effort around trying to limit the loss of instructional time, high school, middle school, and, you know, Holly points out the information out there. Again, for us, the 14 hours of time at the elementary and currently the 28 hours of time spread over the course of the year is important work for us to try to advance, as the folks shared with you, some of the initiatives. And there's other initiatives that some of the board are well aware of too, that we're trying to pay attention to. And again, it's not to say that we don't agree with those, but the number of initiatives and the timeline for us to be up to speed on some of those, particularly just when we're talking curriculum and teacher learning. We have other areas of distraction in the district around things that you've heard, particularly to the business office and some of the implementation there. But that's where we are. And so again, I think the group we're looking for some directional support. February 11th, I have the next Champlain Valley Superintendents meeting, and we'll be adopting what we call the Common Calendar. We have to adopt common 175 days because we share students that go to vocational days. And then after that, obviously, we have to add our 5 more student days, and we have to figure out how we develop our calendar to be clear with parents and guardians around, you know, vacation times and also our early release and late start dates.
Can I ask a question about what it means to coordinate with schools out and the child care providers on the elementary side? Because that was one of my concerns last time when we talked about this, because I I know Schools Out tries to be very flexible, it's still, there's a cost to that, to families who are trying to work on those early release days. What does it mean exactly, coordinating with Schools Out? And also then families who don't normally use those resources are not necessarily in the queue, you know, when Schools Out is full or at capacity, which I'm hearing more and more that we're back to. We had gotten to a point where we had a little extra capacity, and now with increased enrollment and some changes in the student body, we're back to being squeezed at a couple of the schools in terms of Schools Out capacity. So I guess I just wondered, you know, what we're doing exactly to kind of ease the burden on families to make sure that this work can happen.
There is a cost for Schools Out, but many of our families qualify for subsidy for childcare through the Child Care Resource Center. So all of those childcare costs, if they qualify based on their income, is covered because it is a child care cost, whether it's an after-school cost or for the half days. So that works out on those half days. And then the daycare facilities that students use for aftercare, they open earlier on those days. And some of the places, you know, that have little siblings, the older siblings will go to the child care centers for those afternoons if they need it.
And how many in-service days do we have?
Our in-service days, again, have been pretty consistent to our calendar. We start out the beginning of the school year with, you know, kind of our August typical in-service ramp up. We typically haven't had, related to the adding either the early release or late start, we haven't added any additional in-service time. We do have them centered around, again, the 180 to the 189 days, right? We got to get those additional 9 days in there. So that's where we add them at the beginning and the end. Or in some cases, like in this year, we have an in-service on October 18th. Another in-service day, I'm just trying to go through here. March, right? So that's the March 20th. It's coming up, right?
And Delaney was talking about the implicit bias on both those full days. That's when we've been doing some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, K-12. So not just at the high school, but those conversations are happening for part of the in-service time on those full days.
That's very different. The in-service is a whole day. And as Holly said, points out that it's the opportunity for the district, all staff, to be able to either all come together or do a variety of things. And again, talk about some of our work on diversity, equity, inclusion, or bias, or whatever. Those have been important couple of days. So those are the days. And then the end of the year, obviously, we do have a day identified in there as well, like this year's June 15th for an in-service day as well.
David, originally, when I came to the district in 2006, it was the first year for TLCs at the high school. And originally, to gain that time, they took 2 or maybe 3 of the full days of in-service. They took those out of the calendar to make room for they used to be on Wednesdays, the Wednesday late starts. And I think that's what you traded in the full day ones for the early releases.
Yeah, because there was more in-service days spread out through but again, it was difficult. And I think, again, it was also, we recognize the hardship on the parents and also the coordination of the training.
So it's just that it was not much of an addition. It was a trade-off of time and how we use the time to get more regularly scheduled times.
I mean,
for us to
there's
learn.
definitely, as Lisa said, there's been iterations of this along the way. I think it's a delicate balance to ensure that, you know, we're doing the very best we can to meet the needs and be, you know, learners, at the same time being sensitive to parents and their lives, parents and guardians in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for myself, I mean, I certainly value the opportunities for our staff to collaborate. I do think back to the decision of the extra days that were asked for 3 years ago, and there was a commitment iterated at that time that it was a one-time deal at that time. So I think there was an expectation that the community would go through this and kind of put up with the inconveniences, and that it would go back to something that looked a little more routine. I think we're pushing up against the student days here. If you look at 28 days at the high school level, that's, by my estimation, 4 to 6 student days, which drops us pretty close.
28 hours, 28 hours,
Oh, hours.
28 hours.
So that would be, I don't know how many student days that is, but that starts dropping us down in terms of instructional time. I also look at, the district's made a lot of investments in everything from CASs to other professional development to the in-service days you've talked about, guest speakers, to mentor teachers. You go through a laundry list. And I guess one of my fundamental questions is this, we're certainly supporting more collaboration through the significant bond proposal that allows for space that supports that collaboration. Is this a time that the district should pull back a little bit in terms of the inconveniences to families and really focus on practicing the learning that's occurred and leveraging the other opportunities for maybe building level collaboration, and as we've talked about content experts at the elementary school. So should it be individuals that are doing more deep dive into their content and specialty that isn't necessarily supported by collaboration? And these are all questions I have, but I do go back to the original conversations 3 years ago, which this was clearly a one-time extraordinary decision that was made.
Madam Chair, I think those are excellent questions and fair questions. And I wasn't here 3 years ago, but I'm told
Good one.
I'm told that it was that I think that part of the rationale was this big shift around proficiency-based learning, and perhaps some of the work around personalized learning plans. The idea that every student, grades 7 through 12. Now in South Burlington, it's grades 6 through 12. Every single student has a personalized learning plan, and to try to make those meaningful and valuable, and to actually to make them important so that they're expanding opportunities for students. I don't think that work is done. I think if you spoke to students about the personalized learning plans, I don't think that they would tell you that we're meeting that goal yet. And when it comes to proficiency-based learning, I think that 3 years in, we realize that this is a significant reform that has implications for transcripting, for the way we report student learning, for the way we talk with our students. And so I don't, I would just say that in my role as director of learning, I don't see that work as being done. So even if the hope was that we could have that work largely done in 3 years, when that was the decision 3 years ago, I'm here to report that I don't think that it is done.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that things don't stop, We actually have a date that we're supposed to testify around the proficiency-based graduation requirements, because we've got some senators within the state of Vermont that are wanting to repeal it. Mm-hmm. And so, these fits and starts, and again, we believe in a lot of the things that are happening, but in order to do them, you've got to learn about them, you've got to look at systematizing and implementing, you've got to make sure that people are aware, the collective collaboration that they talk about where teachers are together, again, they're very knowledgeable, but what does that mean to me in kindergarten and in fifth grade and fourth, and how is that going to develop into a continuum? So we have some challenges, and right now the challenge is that we've got 189 days or 180 days of student time, and from effective learning, it's not something you can front load on your own and then not have that opportunity to look at progress along the way. Otherwise, it becomes kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you don't have great connectivity in the middle. So it's been important to us. At the same time, I think every one of us, again, we've got a lot of staff that are parents too, and they recognize that it's difficult. And we have worked to try to identify whether it's all on the same day, I think we have some further conversations about what day. Currently, they've been happening, maybe we need to look at the challenge of on what day these happen. And then I would say we've done some things to coordinate with, as Holly pointed out, with our schools out folks and our daycare providers, and making sure that there is accommodations and opportunities for kids, at the high school and the middle school to be able to do the things that they need to do when we're not in session. So.
And to me, it's not just the parent inconvenience side of it and the commitment that was made 3 years ago. It's also putting in practice a lot of the professional learning that's occurred, like trauma-based instruction and the PLPs. And is that 28 hours better served by having students in the building working on their PLP? Is it better served at the elementary school for those hours of having one-on-one time with kids from a trauma-based informed standpoint? So, again, I'm gonna defer to the experts, but I have been here through the whole discussion, and I think it's a fair challenge in terms of those additional hours and days. And I don't disagree that the learning continues, and I don't disagree that there's more work to do. But as David said, there's an effort afoot to rescind proficiency-based learning. So what will that mean in terms of
Something
any
else.
investment in time on a going forward basis? And is this a time to use those hours and practice in the facilities with students and provide a little bit of, respite for families as well?
I think that when you think about the elementary teachers and all that's on their plate with the next gen science standards and the C3 social studies standards and the Common Core ELA and Common Core math, yes, we had, one snippet of C3 social studies, and I can tell you that my teachers are not proficient in C3 social studies standards. Same with next gen, because we have to keep all the balls in the air. So it's trauma-informed practices, and we have a finite number, so we're talking about 18 hours of professional learning, and then we're trying to prioritize, okay, this year it's ELA and math. But that means that we haven't touched the next gen science standards in 4 years. We have to circle back and continue to get our teachers that high quality learning. They just can't learn it with the students in the classroom. They really need to have the time to learn the standards, to develop units, to collaborate with each other. So it really is a challenge when, we're trying to get the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that's, 90 minutes on one of those 2 days each time, which certainly isn't enough to talk about implicit bias and make sure that we're having learning practices that consider thoughtful lessons that don't show bias. So there's just a lot on, and I'm only speaking about the elementary. If you think about your average first grade teacher that needs to be an expert in math and social studies and science and trauma-informed practices, they need the time to learn those skills.
To be fair, I want to go back to the first year of this, and I remember coming to this meeting and asking for more time for the high school and middle school. And that was because we were preparing our NEASC self-study, and in order to do that, we had to have regular time for our teachers to work together, to research together, to write the report. And we realized that was going to take up every one of our TLCs once a month to be able to prepare the report and have it ready for our visitation. At the same time, the middle school had an opportunity to engage in a Tarrant partnership, and they had to commit to a certain number of hours, which our existing TLC learning calendar didn't have enough hours in order for them to commit to that partnership.
In order to have the partnership that, again, is at no cost.
Right. So we came and asked for the extra time so that we could engage in those two projects and continue the regular professional development that needed to happen with proficiency-based learning and our advisories, PLPs, and so on. And so in this first year, we were able to accomplish all of these things. Without the extra, all the high school would have accomplished is the NEASC self-study. All of the other professional development would have been on hold, and the middle school would not have been able to engage in that partnership because they wouldn't have met the minimum number of hours.
That's correct, and I don't think we would have made the same progress. As a matter of fact, it's pretty clear we've accomplished a lot. If you talk in the community, student-led conferences have been very well received by the community as a nice reflection of the PLP work, for example. But I also have to say there, right now, there's a lot of angst about what proficiency-based learning will look like here next year, what it will look like to report out on proficiencies, what summative, formative evaluations would look like. So a lot of things are completely unresolved still.
So I think if if Carson just goes through these slides, you can see all that we've been able to accomplish, and it's double what we would have been able to do. And so I see it says years ahead, just by allowing our teachers to meet twice a month, to collaborate, to learn together, and then to bring that practice right into the classroom immediately. 3 years ago, I don't think we knew what this would mean. And it's so important to us. We're coming back and asking you to consider letting us have the time. The elementary school, I believe they traded in those half-day early releases, a number of those, to embed more regularly scheduled meeting times. So I don't want you to think that the elementary school is getting a good deal. They have fewer hours than us. I believe they need more, but they were able to gain more regularly scheduled collaboration by adjusting their existing calendar. I don't think they got more hours.
So I don't know, I mean, I'm looking for a little direction. As I said, I have the February 11th CVSA. That's again where we have to set the regional calendar, and then everybody goes back and has to add. We do designate what we call non-common days. So those are days that those of us that have more days to add on students, that's where we go back and add those. But we have to have the agreed upon common 175. That's on February 11th. And we have a board meeting on the 19th. And I'd love to bring, my hope is to bring the calendar for approval. I know we've got a lot of moms, dads, guardians, folks, community members asking about the calendar, particularly about making future plans and start day, end day, et cetera. So I'd like to be able to bring the calendar back on the 19th and would love to have this embedded in that. So again, I'm looking for some direction, next steps.
I think I need to ask one more question, though. We're talking about the impact on families and the inconvenience, but I'm assuming by the time high school rolls around, my kid is setting the alarm and getting up, and so that doesn't seem like a big inconvenience to me. I don't know how true that is for middle school, Karsten.
It's not as much of an inconvenience.
So, I mean, really, we're talking about elementary school early release, right? So, like, are families able to do schools out a la carte and say just on those early release days, we'd like coverage? I'm trying to figure out, like, where the pain is,
Yeah, I would say, we have families that's a day they go and have play dates with somebody else's, mom. We have moms that are picking up 2 or 3 children, and then they go home and have a play date. Schools out, if there is space, they put, most of the schools out people, though, are students who are already signed up for schools out, and we have a huge number of students who are in schools out in all 3 of our elementary schools.
Yeah. So potentially access to that aftercare is one place. I don't know if transportation is too.
No question. Between our capacity and the total student population, there's a number there that, is not able to be accommodated without, as Holly said, a mom, dad, or neighbor or somebody helping out there. And again, I think it's important to say, too, I mean, high school, yes, they're much more independent, and middle school, but, I think it's still important for a parent and guardian to be able to be, available, that sometimes those unstructured times maybe could be concerns. But again, I think over time, that's been something that, has evolved. And, I'm not saying we're done either. I think the continued collaboration with our own program and Schools Out is a good example of how we've tried to make that work for our students.
It
Yeah,
definitely
you've heard
is.
more than I have, Bridget, right? So,
It's one more piece to the childcare puzzle, and, having been a single mom myself, it's, things, we luckily give people enough notice where they can schedule it. And our area daycare places open their doors for half-days.
Yeah, I'm just struggling too, because I absolutely see the value in the work that's been done. I've seen it in other work that I've, done in the high school in particular and the middle school. I've seen the value that's come out of the TLCs. I am struggling though, because it's not just inconvenience. I mean, this isn't just a childcare problem. At the elementary school, I mean, those kids are missing, it used to be if those were full days, then those full days were tacked on someplace else. We had a certain minimum number of days. What we're saying now is that we're diluting that a little bit. I mean, kids are missing instructional time on those early release days that they would otherwise have. And the question is whether, the child care that they're getting or the program they're going to or is adding, value, and whether they're getting more value out of what's happening in the TLCs in the long run. So that kind of makes up for the fact that you're missing, real core, reading, writing, science on those days. So it's really hard. It's a really, really tough decision about how we allocate those resources and how we divide this time up. I do absolutely see the value, and I also understand the pressure that the state, in terms of all the different mandates, has put on districts, and this is where we're feeling that pinch, really. I mean, this is where that work gets done, and it's hard to figure out where that work will get done if it's not in this kind of arrangement. I haven't seen a better arrangement, kind of come forth that allows us to get all of that work done, and it doesn't seem to be going away, because as fast as we start to adapt to something, it feels like there's a tweak or a change or there's a new thing that comes up. So, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. And as an elementary school parent, I curse all of us, every time a Friday early release day, especially one that's really close to another break, kind of comes up. On the other hand, like I said, in all seriousness, I do see huge value in them. But yeah, that was one of the reasons I asked about the teachers and how they're feeling about them, because I just haven't really had a lot of feedback about the professional development from teachers specifically. Alex, did you have something?
Are you looking for a response from the administration?
Well, it would be helpful for us to get some feedback. I mean, I think you talk about, notification and information, and albeit we're approaching February, but I know a lot of people begin to do some planning, early. So I'd love to be able to bring a calendar that reflects comprehensively what we're trying to do. So I would like some feedback.
Okay, yeah, I just have a general question for the administration. So, earlier on it was mentioned that the teachers are inspired to go forth and do great work once they have these late starts. However, they're on a Friday. And when I was a learner or a student, I would spend the weekend forgetting stuff. So why don't we move that? Why do you have them on Fridays instead of Monday or a Tuesday?
Right. Well, we did hear, you mentioned teacher feedback. Teachers did say that having them in the middle of the week really broke up the kind of instructional flow. You have momentum and you're getting somewhere with your students, and then there's a big hole in the middle. So that was one consideration. We did look at the long weekend, the danger of long weekends, and if people would, be tempted by Fridays to just kind of have a long weekend. And the attendance data doesn't reflect, teachers are taking it seriously and doing really good work. And I'd be glad to share some of we almost put sort of testimonials from some of the positive feedback that we have, and I'd be glad to share that back with the board, with David. I don't know if you guys had something else about Wednesday.
But I'm hearing concerns over all time. I'm hearing close to vacation. I'm hearing, a multitude of things, but, the timing and where we may have them close to a vacation, or we've just come off or just going. I'm hearing that. And also the Friday piece from you also, Alex. So again, this feedback for us, I think, is important as we go forward. And again, I feel obligated to be transparent, obviously, with you guys and where we go. And I need to put a calendar in front of you to be adopted, and I'd like to be able to include these in there.
I think there's a
Would
question
you
or
like
comment.
the other reason for the Friday? So the high school's responsible for the Friday, and it's for a really good reason. We operate on a blue and gray day schedule.
Right.
And our students who have internships and jobs and take college courses, we found that the closer our schedule resembled the schedules of those colleges, it gave students more access to having to being able to access those kinds of courses. So UVM will run courses on a Tuesday, Thursday, or a Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Right.
For example, our students could take a college course on a Tuesday, Thursday, because those days are always guaranteed. When we had or a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. When we had the TLCs on a Wednesday, it really impacted the students' ability to sign up for those kinds of courses or do those kinds of internships. It just worked better for students to have 4 days in a row where they could engage, and then Friday they could alternate. And we found that more students were able to have a schedule that allowed them to be in and out of our school and have flexible pathways. And then we were asked to consolidate the days so they happened on the same day. So I think that impacted the elementary school because we really wanted to keep that that opportunity for our high school kids to
Yeah.
have other opportunities.
Thank you.
It's a domino effect. The calendar can be a big domino effect.
All right, Jerry?
What grade do you introduce students to the concept of implicit bias?
Yeah, so the learning that we're doing with teachers starts with our pre-kindergarten teachers.
Do you introduce students to the concept of implicit bias? I mean, you talk about it.
I think that's, some of that's the work ahead, if this is reapproved. And we wouldn't use probably the words implicit and bias with preschoolers, but
That's why I asked what grade.
yeah, exactly. But I think that but the thinking is that it's never too early to start. So I appreciate your question because that's the goal. It's not something that we want to be introducing in high school. So thanks.
Any further discussion? All right, I think you've got some direction notes there. Thanks for the
Yes.
presentation.
So again, thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, board.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 10, master planning and visioning update.
So I don't know, I'm gonna look to Brian and Bridget maybe a little bit, but I think we've covered a fair amount. I think the whole board maybe knows where we are. I think Elizabeth, you've been right along with it too. Alex, I guess you and Delaney, if there's questions that you have, probably this might be the best use of our time, but I think you're pretty aware of where we are, our timelines. You've reviewed kind of the ballot language. We've got a whole series of meetings that have either happened or are going to happen. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be adding more, so this is always, I think, probably a good opportunity, like what are we missing? Maybe some of you have some knowledge of places, including you, Delaney, on where we should be talking or meeting with, so
Well,
again.
that's what, one thing I did want to say there is that I'm assuming
There-
R10 is breaking up steering committee from this meeting in terms of how things are posted, so it might just bear repeating.
Yeah.
That on January 30th, so a week from tomorrow, there is a community information night on master planning and visioning at the high school in cafeteria 2 from 7 to 9 p.m. So that'll be a short presentation followed by some different tables that people can circulate through to ask specific questions and get more information on different topics. And then February 12th, which is a Wednesday, there will be a repeat of that community information night again at the high school on February 12th from 7 to 9 p.m. Patrick Burke and Karsten Schlenter are also providing tours on a drop-in basis. Patrick's tours are set up from 7:30 to 8:30 on Tuesday or Friday morning every week, with the exception of February 11th, which he's not doing tours. And then during February break week and those first first 2 days of, or the first day of the following week, so the day before town meeting. He's also offering tours of the high school at 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. So those are ways to learn more information. There is a project website set up at www.southburlingtonvtschools.com. And so there are lots of ways to get more information about the project. So we really just want people to be informed before they go vote, and we want people to get out there and go vote. It does bear repeating that absentee ballots are available starting February 12th, and early voting at City Hall also starts on that day. So if you are planning to be away for February break or any other reason leading up to March 3rd, and you won't be here on March 3rd, which is the day of the vote, it would be good to go to City Hall and or request a absentee ballot so you can vote.
The only thing I would add is, since RITN is here, we do our forum in public access. This happens to be Channel 17, and that's on the 29th, and there'll be both a budget overview and our master planning and visioning. So we have an hour dedicated or carved out through local access. So it's opportunity, it's live, and it does give people the opportunity to ask questions or call in if they so choose. So that's another.
And are we warning the 2 public forum so that
We will.
if there's board attendance?
Yes, and then we should also say town meeting information night, we'll probably talk about it again when we
Yep.
get to the communication plan, but town meeting information night is on Monday, March 2nd, at 7 p.m. in the middle school cafeteria.
Correct. And we're in just I think our next item, or no, after our next item, we'll have Juniper, our communication folks are here to also talk a little bit more about the communication plan. So again, we'll have an opportunity to hear where we are and add some other things in. Thanks.
Is there any outstanding information that we would expect between now and the vote relative to either our bond experts or, I'm just trying to think, I can't recall any specific areas that weren't flushed out.
No, I don't think so. I think the only one that I would be sensitive to is that based on the state factors that we know are moving around, which are the predictors or the projections used in the all of the work. You know, if those significantly change, I think it's important to be noted that I'm not getting the right words, but our data points that we use, equalized, all those things, if those are significantly changing, I think we do need to pay attention to that as we continue along that. Again, I'm just going to say if equalized comes out significantly different than our assumptions that were made initially, we may want to begin to just, bracket those a little bit. But, I mean, that's dangerous because, we've communicated this information and I think you'd have to put a caveat in there or something. But it does worry me a little bit if there's significant changes between now and March 2nd.
That impacts more the budget than.
Yeah, but again, those are same assumptions on the bonds are,
They're used for the
they're
taxpayer
used.
impact.
Yeah.
Because the
So
debt
the chart.
service all flows
That's
through
right.
the regular budget in those years, so we use those same
Yeah,
assumptions to project tax.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that right now they've significantly changed enough to keep redoing that, because you can go, and again, Gary can speak more to that, but I think if there are significant changes, it would probably be a point in time where we would say, we probably ought to, reevaluate or update it.
Those are statistically relatively insignificant
Yeah.
compared to the volatility that interest rate fluctuation
Right.
could have on our
Thanks.
estimates.
All right. We'll move on to considering the request for proposal for legal services, and this is warned for action. By way of background, an RFP was issued, and we have five.
We had 5 that responded.
5 legal firms responded to cover a number of legal services the district may engage in, including student matters, including personnel matters, including collective bargaining and so forth. And there was an opportunity to interview. 4 of the firms were invited in to interview. And there was a process by which the firms were rated for a number of variables, including their depth and breadth of their bench, their experiences, their skill sets, variety of work they've done in supporting school districts in the past. And there is a recommendation to take action on inviting the firm of McNeil, Leddy and Sheehan to provide legal services to the district and the board on a going forward basis. Do I have a motion that supports that?
So moved.
Second?
Do we have further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so we'll get back
Got
to
it.
the firms and so forth. All right, moving on to agenda item 12, the Budget and Master Planning Visioning Bond Communication Plan.
Yeah, so I'm going to invite Nicole and Jess from Juniper, part of our communication team, to come on up and share with you. Again, I think most of the board members, I know Bridget certainly knows them well, Brian, and I think Elizabeth, you, but Alex, again, probably getting to know them you may not know them.
I know
So-
Jess, but not Nicole.
Awesome,
Hi.
so welcome. And here to really walk you through, answer some questions around kind of our communication plan. I think it is by your side. It's, there's some dates there. And again, this is a great opportunity for conversation around how we continue to look towards making sure community members are informed about both the budget and the bond. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. What do you propose is the best way to walk through the communications plan with you? Yeah, I assume you have it all in front of you. Yeah.
I think so, and leaving opportunity for some, for the dialogue. Yeah. Do you have it, Alex?
It should have been at your place, I'm not sure.
Oh,
Here,
sure.
I can share.
In the packet.
No,
I
you're all
don't
right.
think it was in the packet.
That's not at your place.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so the goal of the communication plan, as we said, was it's just disseminate, accurate and timely information to, make sure that the decision on March 3rd, that they have all the information. So it is, it's a multi-channel plan. So some people are really, other paper, they're all about it. Other people are really into social media. Other people really want to read a lot, go to a website and get more information. So we've tried to craft a plan where no matter what that touch point that they prefer, that they have that option. So I'll just kind of run through this. So social media, we did at our working group meeting this morning, some of these things are a little bit in flux. So we talked originally about this being housed on the actual school board Facebook page. There was some discussion this morning about possibly having that be a community Facebook page, but some sort of a Facebook presence that we could be creating posts that are, informational, fun facts, things like that, and possibly putting some boosting behind that to just share information there. We can talk about creating some, little video snippets for people, getting them engaged and excited about that process. Do you want to speak to a website?
We developed the South Burlington vtschools.com website, and right now that is populated with past presentations, current presentations, all of the plans, videos as they're ongoing and being updated. In addition, there are dates for all of the upcoming meetings and events, and that's now being geo-targeted through Google AdWords advertising to South Burlington. So if you live or work within South Burlington, you're being delivered mobile or a digital ad in your browser, depending on what your search terms are. It's delivered to you so that you click over.
So, and the goal is, no matter what we're putting out there, that we're really trying to drive people to that website and using the new website because it's just got so much information. And then certainly contact information that someone could reach out to ask questions. So whatever, if as school board members you're putting things out there, trying to link back to that website is definitely key to the process.
And then moving on, traditional advertising is part of this mix. And so you talked about advertising in today's working group meeting.
So we, again, we're finalizing whether it's going to be print ads and/or inserts and some combination of the two. So again, it's the same thing. Some people, they like the print ad. That's how they, they, as David says, he picks up the paper and he just shakes out the inserts and he never looks at them. And other people, really love the insert of something that's a takeaway that they can share with their neighbors. Sorry, David, throwing you under the bus.
No, it's all right.
So, giving people that option. And also with the insert, it can be a little bit larger. So it would be full page ad, possibly 2 iterations of that, and 1 insert. That would be at 1117 folded in half. So maybe be able to add some more of the graphics that are great, and then some addressing some of those additional questions and talking points that can't quite fit into that full page ad. So if people have strong feelings about timing, certainly open to that. We're trying to finalize that in the next couple days.
And again, this is regardless of the channel or the medium, it is to put out actual factual information and encourage people to get out and vote. So that's the tone and messaging behind all of this communication.
And then, as we talked about earlier, the public meetings and drop-in tours, finalizing everything for the kickoff public meeting next Thursday. And studies have shown that just not getting up there and just talking for 45 minutes, but actually doing like a 15 to 20-minute intro about the whys of it, and then really letting people go and have some face-to-face interaction. And people maybe aren't as apt to ask questions in a big group, but maybe if they had, one person one-on-one. So certainly trying to get people, if people are excited about this, trying to get them to also be there and be able to be part of that, the message of the why, I think would be helpful. And then Pat Burke is also doing the coffee talks or the tours in the mornings, and I don't think we've had a lot of attendance, but at least I think it's also just showing we're here to answer questions, so that transparency, so people can't say, we didn't know, we didn't have a chance. So really giving people lots of different options to have that face-to-face, if they'd like that.
Is there any part of the communication that has kind of an FAQ component to it?
So on the website, there's a fairly substantial FAQ that people can visit, and it pretty much hits everything that you can think of. We're also open to continuing to develop that as new questions come in.
Does it direct people to other parts of the site? Because I am thinking of some of the questions we talked about getting earlier, like what other options were considered? Would it direct people to a previous
in some
presentation?
instances, I believe it does. I would have to double check and circle back with you, but certainly we can ensure that functionality is there if it's not already.
Yeah. And yeah, if you go to the site, making changes is very quick and easy. So if you're feeling like we've missed something, again, don't hesitate. And then as far as to answer your question, so the brochures that we created, do we have any of those here?
Yes.
So they're not in a question format, but it's basically the FAQs made as statements about the why and the benefits and all that. So that's in that piece. And then the plan for social media would certainly be to take those questions and putting that out there. So to hopefully create discussion on those posts.
And then I didn't see another popular interactions, Front Porch Forum, was that discussed?
We talked about that early on,
At least
actually.
providing a link to the website.
Yeah, and we had talked about that early on, and there's the opportunity to do, as you know, advertising through Front Porch Forum or having community members post on Front Porch Forum. So that certainly, I think early on we had determined that the advertising aspect of it was not necessarily where we wanted to go, but we can certainly utilize Front Porch Forum to drive people to the website.
Elizabeth as chair has access to all the Front Porch Forums. And
Oh,
so
wonderful.
she can post something to all the Front Porch Forums at once. So if we create content or give her what we would like her to do.
I can't do any, I can't take a position, but I
Oh,
can
no.
sort of reference a site for more
But
information.
pushing people toward the website
Get more
and pushing people
information.
toward community meetings and those kinds of things, that would be ideal for Front Porch Forum.
That's great.
And are the tours happening regardless of sign up? I got a little mixed
Yes.
message on that.
Yep, so Karsten and Pat are available during those times as drop-ins and through school vacation week as well.
Yeah, so it's come, you don't have to sign up.
Yeah, I think
know,
that
and-
added step, I mean, it would be convenient for
Yeah,
them
but-
to
yeah,
know,
that's
but
right.
I think if they're more
They just,
available.
Patrick,
They're here anyway.
yeah,
I-
Patrick
they
has
just
carved those
make sure
out,
that they've-
and he's done a couple already. I think 2 people on one of them, so, he's just trying to make sure he's available for those times as Karsten.
And as topics come up, or hot topics, certainly continuing to keep media abreast of what we're doing as we get closer. I think that'll continue to be important. That, and then added today was just talking about the school administrator outreach. What's the name of that channel that's used as far as the outreach?
17,
No.
RETM.
Like the letters.
Oh,
RETM. Is that-
our Power School
Power School.
Messenger.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a letter that was crafted, that's being edited, so that's going to be sent out in addition to, here's all the meetings, I think there's going to be a weekly blast that go out to parents via that channel.
Good.
Great.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Nicole.
Questions?
Any further discussion?
Was there anything to say about the different booths that we're going to have at the public? We talked about a few in the working session this morning, for instance. There's been great interest in sports and what's going to happen both after and during.
And of course, cost.
Cost, obviously.
I think there's
Yeah.
So-
five booths.
Yeah.
The idea was just to be on the public information, these upcoming meetings would be, still give a quick overview, I think, is what I heard.
Yep.
And then these 5 areas, one of which was, costs, costs, sports, I don't know, do you remember the?
Security, yeah.
Security.
Current plans
Current-
overall, so sort of the attributes, like the details. So we'll have a very high level of, this is site plan, this is high level floor plan, but if people want to dig into, what are you doing about special education, and what are you doing about STEM, or, these deep questions about like how the facilities are designed, there'll be a table about that.
And these ideas, the tables would be staffed with individuals, 2 or 3 that could help answer the questions. And so if you get 15 people over, you can strategize on how to, have a more intimate conversation with them, as opposed to, a lot of people we know, at least when there's a larger group, some feel more compelled to be able to ask a question, some are, much more silent and won't. So giving them the opportunity to kind of self-select and get their questions answered was the intent.
And then with the social media, it's just to push information, right? Both because we cannot take a position, but also because we don't want to get into a back and forth where one person represents the
That's
board.
right.
I mean,
That's my understanding.
that's always true, right? Yeah, so, yeah.
The other piece with social media, which will allow us to, again, like Google AdWords geo-target, so to ensure that people are receiving the message no matter where they are. So if they're not consuming traditional media, that we can reach them through a digital platform more easily, too.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, our pleasure.
Yeah.
It was very educational.
Very interesting.
So the other part is we have budget communication, and so you have the flyer design, and I would love, we would love, again, Amity and Gary have put this primarily together with very little feedback from me, so thanks to them. But again, it captures, I think, a lot of information. There's 2 things. We've got, this would be the insert, the smaller one. It's a 4-page. It would be an insert in the other paper. So it has more information. And then the larger sheet is the 2-pager that would be in there. So again, we're looking for, yes, go ahead.
Sheet is actually the way it printed, but in last year's other paper, it was in the center of the paper as one piece, and then the back side was the other. So you opened the paper, and it was the front and back of this.
Opposing pages.
Opposing pages, thank you, for those who don't know.
Yeah,
the
but it
fact.
was a single
It was-
page that fit the
right.
size of the paper.
Right, the size of the paper is irrelevant on this, it's the size of the other paper itself, and so,
Yeah.
just to save paper, I wanted it to be on one piece.
Mhm.
So is there
We're
a
looking
time frame
for-
you're looking for feedback, Gwen?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have to let Judy at the other paper know tomorrow how much space we
Thank you.
need. So, it will depend on whether we go with the 2-page, so she'd have to keep that center Or if we go with the 4-page, I think she just needs to know for insertion.
So I've never seen us publish this
Four.
level of
No, we haven't.
detail.
Nope, we have not.
Right, we have not.
Did that feedback come from somewhere in particular?
No, it was prepared last year and then it was, cut
Have
back.
it as an
So
option.
it was just put together again and as an option.
Can I chime in on this? Page 3 of this, and it's all useful information, but I think page 3 would be amongst the least valuable in determining how to vote. And it appears to me as the larger one is page 1, 2, and 4 of this. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So are you looking for direction on a decision of a print ad, 2-page print versus an insert?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, my recommendation, I guess, would be to go this way. I think, given also what I'm hearing for quick feedback is, there is detail, but people can get the detail other places. We've got a lot of information posted up about the budget. This, I think, is more informative to the individual that's wanting to be able to understand and make a decision.
I think this, yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
I think people who are, as Alice is saying, who are interested in the level of detail of page 3 and page 4,
Yeah.
I would make, the full, this little line about the full, I'll have, I'm sure, yes, I always do, have a whole bunch of comments about, about this, but one thing I would say is make that sort of link to where you can get the full budget book a little bit bigger so that people
Yeah.
understand that this is not all they're getting. But I do really like Gary's, format that he had created last year for, explaining how you get from expense budget down to property tax rate. I think that's really helpful, and I think, in general, the information we've got on here, I like this format a lot better than the
So
4-pager.
for clarity purposes to Judy, we can say it's
All we
this.
need to let her know by tomorrow is that we want the center 2 pages. And then we have time until Friday to get her the edits.
Okay, so Friday, I understand as well, is when you need any comments on the
Budget
budget
books.
book.
Correct.
As well, so the budget book and the ad you need
Yes.
by Friday. What
Yes.
time on Friday?
Um,
Noon? It's usually noon that you guys
Yeah,
ask
it
for.
typically is so that there's time to do the edits and then get the next product back out.
Okay.
Because then it gets a very short turnaround time for that final review.
So do we know how the city usually submits their budget into the other paper? Is it insert, or
I have no idea, I'm sorry.
it would be nice to be consistent? Is that something we could clarify tomorrow? I think there's a general consensus toward the print center 2 pages, but I would like to know
Coordinate and also maybe dates.
if there is
or-
an opportunity to coordinate.
Can
Yeah.
ask.
On the one hand, I agree. On the other hand, ours is so much more complicated in terms of what
Right.
we're trying to express, because it's just not as simple a formula, and it's a much bigger budget, so it.
Well, I'm just thinking to have a community member who's going to be voting on both budgets have the information in at least to know if it's going to be in a similar format in the same issue, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not
can ask,
saying
yep.
yeah, necessarily change it, but, so, board members in particular, looking for feedback on content and on this and the budget.
Budget book.
Correct.
Yep,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you, Amity, Gary.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 13, negotiations update. And we do have we have had one meeting with the SBEA, and we'll be exchanging initial proposals on February 3rd. And has there been a meeting with support staff?
Martin and I are due to get together with those folks, I think on Monday the 10th at 4.
So that initial meeting has been scheduled.
Yep.
All right. Move on to agenda item 14, other paper articles. I think we have that list.
Yeah, so I'm up next, that's due in about a week, and originally it was just projected tax impact analysis, but now it says something about running for the school board, so I wondered.
I'm not sure. We had decided that that
Yeah, I
wasn't
think we
worthwhile,
took-
because at that point it would be
It's
too
too
late
late,
to
right?
submit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why we did the other.
You guys
that's-
did an ad
Yep.
to say that people should be aware that they need to get their stuff in if they're gonna do it. But, yeah, I don't think we should use our
Right.
precious column space on that if it's too late to do anything about it.
Cool.
So we will opt for the projected tax impact analyses.
That was my understanding, yes.
Okay. Delaney, you were out last week when you got assigned. Potentially, we're looking for
You just
some
volunteered
input.
for everything.
Potentially an article in one of the last two issues on the work you're doing, or anything else you'd like to include around mental health issues.
Yeah, totally. I've already written up quite a bit of stuff on that, so I could totally throw
Okay,
something together.
so maybe we'll put that in the 4:30.
When would that be?
Yeah, so the two
Submission.
possible ones are these last two. So
Okay,
either at the end of April
4:30?
or the end
Yeah.
of May.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of those times terrible.
And I'm not sure if you were here for the beginning of the steering committee meeting, but one of the budget items that the city reviewed was around a community outreach coordinator that the city funds to support crisis mental health issues within the community. And it sounds like there's a report that's been generated, and that might be helpful, David, to get a hold of that at least, and maybe start by sharing that with Delaney and see if there's sort of a broader South Burlington approach from a mental health standpoint, sort of student and city related, if you're open to reading that report on the board's behalf.
When's the April break?
where?
Does that have any impact on this?
It's right after April break. I was just checking.
And is that good or bad, or doesn't
It's
matter?
fine. Yeah, it's
We
fine.
could shift it to the next one if
well,
you
April
want.
break might give me some time to actually work on it.
All right, why don't we shift that? And then, so we'll just need a topic for the 4:30.
No, she's saying
No,
that
she's
she'll do the
saying
April.
Oh, I'm sorry, keep
She's
it.
saying it would actually
Okay,
help.
sorry.
She'll
Yeah.
have that time to do it,
Yeah.
so she
Gotcha.
can make.
Okay,
the-
so we're okay then.
Where would I find the report?
Well,
We're
I
gonna
can help
ask
you,
the
Delaney, too, or you
superintendent
can
to
give me
locate that.
you know, we can connect, but the city has a community outreach person, and that would be my desire. We just connect with them, and we'll maybe set up a meeting, and some of that would be good learning for me and for you, and you could then use that for part of your
And it
article
may or may
writing.
not
Maybe,
be relevant
maybe,
to an
yeah.
article that you want to author, but because it came up today, and I think it's important
Yeah.
to the whole community, it might have might be informational. Okay,
I think 528, the one due on 528, could be a very good one on 180 Market Street, only because my understanding is that this summer is the big sort of makeover of parking lots and all of that stuff that would happen at Rick Marcotte, and it could be a really good moment to just sort of prepare people for what's going to happen the day after school closes there. I'm assuming, if the city's still on schedule to do that, but it sounds like they probably are. And we could just change that later on if we feel like, because we have time before then, if we feel like we need to change it. I'm happy to raise my hand for the voting outcomes or participation one that would need to go in on the 26th of March.
all right.
Bridget, you mind if I step up to bat on one of
Oh,
these?
yes, I hadn't noticed. Yes, you're welcome to. Do you want to do voting outcomes and participation?
Love
That's
to.
a pretty straightforward article, I think.
We can assign Martin to 180
Yeah,
Market
right.
Street.
Nice.
We'll put a tentative Martin on that one.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. All right, we'll move on to setting the agenda for the February 5th meeting.
Again, I indicated earlier about that one, that teacher addition at Rick Marcotte. So again, we're working through that right now. So that may be an ad. I'm just saying that
Okay.
that would be a placeholder.
And obviously, the times on 10 and 11 are kind of funky.
Right.
I didn't know how much time wanted to be devoted to each of those
No.
things, but
I think, again, it was more of an update, probably 11. Yeah, there's times there that jumping around on that one, right? We want to keep you here longer at 10:05.
chop out an hour there, that's all right.
Right.
2 hours, that'd be good.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on the February 5th agenda? Yeah,
9:05
Yeah,
to
yeah,
10:25.
Trying to make sure everybody's
I know where that
paying
happened.
attention, right?
All right, we'll move on to future agenda items. Did we get any dates on here?
Nope. I haven't done
Looks like we have not gotten
additional
those yet.
work. I also have to put Jewel on here too, so I don't want you to think I've forgotten about Jewel.
Okay, all right.
For February 5th or? just
I don't know. I've got to get that. I've got some more work to do around.
Okay.
Around that, and I may just bring it and put it on before the board and not. So I'm in the process of figuring that out.
All right, so we have a number of meeting minutes to consider, starting with January 6th. This was a working session. Any comments, discussion?
Okay, fine.
Seeing none, those are approved. January 8th was a regular meeting.
And not substance, little nitpicky stuff. Last week I found out I get to give that to Delina. Can I give that to you? Just a
Yes.
couple of little,
Yep, if you got a little mark on it, maybe, can you just, anything big, it's
just
just,
hand it over, yeah, right? Okay. Is that okay?
it's
Mike?
substantive.
Okay.
Okay, with, any other comments or questions? With those minor modifications coming from Brian, those are approved. January 9th, it's a special meeting. Seeing no comments, those are approved. And January 13th was a working session.
Also, I thought, that's fine.
Seeing none, those are approved. All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda.
Yeah, so, just highlighting this one, this is a Rick Marcotte hire. This, again, is not related to that enrollment. This is, you had approved, a resignation of a special educator, so this brings on, a new one, to replace that person, and obviously it's a portion of the remaining of the school year, so.
I was confused
More
about this one
Lynch.
because she was on
Yeah,
leave
too.
from Burlington, so
Yep.
I thought it was interesting that she, first of all, even showed interest, because I
Yep.
didn't understand. And
So-
then went, I'm assuming because she's sort of hired in the middle of the year, she's a one-year
Yep.
employee, but then the position's in the budget already for next year, because it's a continuing position, so my confusion was
For
like,
her,
what-
you mean, for
what
her
would-
at Burlington, you mean, continuing position.
Well, this
for
is
her.
a continuing position, right? We didn't take out any special educator
No,
position.
no, this, so we had our person left, and we allowed that person to resign.
Mm-hmm.
This person actually had a year leave from Burlington for the purposes of exploring program in Vietnam, which did not work out. The program just didn't work, but she was approved leave
Okay.
from Burlington, so she's, obviously, her position was filled.
Uh-huh.
We have a need, and so she applied to this position and to fill the remainder of this year. This is, again, a one-year non-renewable contract based on the time frame that she's signing it.
Quick question, Dave, how many other candidates applied for this position?
I think there was probably 4 or 5 in total. I mean, it's a mid-year position,
Yeah.
it's not permanent, so,
And, yeah,
yeah, I think there was 4 or 5 that applied, and then
Is-
3 or 4,
And
3
just
were
out of
interviewed.
curiosity, is this something we have to validate with Burlington?
We don't, well, we did, I mean, on my credential review process, it's, are you under contract?
Mhm.
And so I did ask for an email, correspondence that back from Burlington that was this, it's one, I mean, I want to be, expect people in these would be honest, but I did want to just make a double check, like, or is this correct?
Mhm.
And so they did, and they gave me an email saying, yes, this was true and fine to be hired if you need.
All right.
Yep.
We'll move on to any questions on agenda item 19, AP orders 25 or 26.
Nope.
Agenda item 20, we have an action required for an AP order to Howard Center for Human Services in the amount of $82,264.88. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Second?
Any further questions?
I just wondered why so many of the numbers were the same. Are these like identical payments on different weeks or something? And it was only a question.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think it's just the way the invoice dates are related to that. Yeah, the way the
And no
invoice dates.
intentional duplication or anything, obviously, yeah. Cool. All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes, and I will take a motion to adjourn regular session to move into executive session for purpose of discussing labor negotiations with administrators, teachers, and support staff where premature general public knowledge would place the board at substantial disadvantage.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll move into executive session.